We've created a wine compass in O'Brien's to categorise the different styles of wine so that you can find your own style. Crisp, elegant, sparkling are our most classic wine styles on our wine compass in O'Brien's. These wines contain champagne in this category, but also wines from around the world. They're made from different grape varieties, from different countries, but stylistically the wines are the same. They're dry, they're fresh, they're elegant, perhaps even sometimes a touch austere into that elegance. The other thing to look for in this wine style is something that we call autolytic character. It's a slightly bready note, a slightly toasty note in the wines, even brioche. And that comes from spent yeast lees from the second fermentation in bottle. And that just gives a lovely richness to the wines. These wines are all made in the same way as champagne. That is that there are two fermentations. The grapes arrive in the cellar, there's a first fermentation where a still wine is made, and the second fermentation is where the magic happens. The second fermentation takes place in bottle in the cellars of the winery, and that's where you get the bubbles created, but also the autolytic character, the brioche, the bready notes, hints of richness in the wine. The wines are all dry, the wines all have high acidity, they're all refreshing, and they're all elegant wines, and they're perfect to match with food. Firstly, looking at Cava, a great value alternative to champagne. As you can see, the wine is a beautiful pale straw. You can check the colour against a white sheet of paper. You can see it's clear and bright, but you can also see colour gradation against a white sheet of paper. On the nose, there are notes of peach, there are notes of citrus. These are not flavours or aromas that are added to the wine. These occur naturally during the fermentation process and present themselves in that way in the glass afterwards. Palate-wise, this is dry, crisp and fresh. A lovely delicate bubble, or sometimes known as bead, on the palate. The citrus aromas from the nose carry through to the palate, and then you have a touch of a slightly rich peach note on the palate, and a hint of the brioche that you're looking for in this wine style, coming from the second fermentation and the contact with spent yeast with the wine. So you have a really interesting combination of flavours and a really good food matching style. This Cava comes from Penedès in Spain, although Cava can be made in other regions in Spain, for example in Rioja. This style is fantastic naturally with tapas and richer foods because the acidity in the wine cuts through beautifully any rich, oily foods, and you end up with an overall balanced impression on the palate. Wine number 2 is a Champagne de Bourgogne, and this is from Burgundy in France. When you're pouring a sparkling wine, and you'll see we're using wine glasses here because it's important to allow the aromas to gather in the top of the glass. So we pour just very, very gently against the side of the glass. You can start to see a lovely mousse forming on the top of the wine, the lovely white frothy bubbles we call mousse. And then you can look at your colour. You hold your glass up, you can see the bubbles or the bead rising from the bottom of the glass. And a typical thing to look for in sparkling wine, if it's a tiny fine bead, it usually means that the wine is of fine quality, and the fatter and rounder and larger the bead suggests that the wine is a bit cheaper. Now that's not good or bad, it depends on the occasion, it depends on the budget, but it is something that you can look for in a sparkling wine. Champagne de Bourgogne is made from 100% Chardonnay, and in terms of aroma, you have again a citrusy note here, which is kind of common thread through this style of wine because you are looking for that freshness, that citrusy note. It's important that you have that to balance the flavours in the wine and to allow the wine to match with food. And you definitely have that autolytic character, that slightly bready, yeasty note in the wine. Technically, the wine has to spend around 18 months in the bottle on the yeast lees to start to develop that brioche, bready character. So sometimes sparkling wine won't have that aroma profile, even if it is made in the same way as champagne, this traditional method of second fermentation in bottle. But always look for it because it's an interesting character addition to the wine. So a touch of brioche here, touch of citrus, and then on the palate, there is citrus, but there's also a creaminess on the palate here. Partly coming from the Chardonnay grape itself, partly coming from the brioche character. It's presenting a slightly creamy here, but it's still dry, it's still refreshing, and it's beautifully crisp on the finish. So again, a really good food style of wine. We're in Burgundy here, so there's lots of delicious food in Burgundy, quite rich foods. Anything from game through to red meats through to cheeses. And this is a gorgeous style of aperitif, the start of a dinner party, but even at the end of a dinner party to refresh the palate. It's the perfect style of wine. Now moving on to champagne, and we're going to open this bottle of champagne. As a reminder, you can put your thumb in the punt at the bottom of the bottle, which helps to secure the bottle of champagne. You've already taken your foil off and you're gently removing the wire. This is the most dangerous part, so it's important not to point it at anyone or at anything delicate. And you just very gently start to twist the bottle. You're not looking for champagne going everywhere. You're looking for an elegant pop and then pouring the champagne into the glass. So, the benchmark for pretty much all the sparkling wine in the world is your Champagne region in France. And this wine is made from 3 grapes, Chardonnay, so same grape as in the Bourgogne, but also has 2 black grapes, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. But the wine is white because what happens is that when the grapes arrive at the winery, the juice is immediately removed from the skins, and there's no colour from those black skins going into the juice, because the skins of the black Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, yes, the skins are black, but the juice is clear. So what we have is obviously a delicious white wine. So again, it's important to look at colour. You can see it's actually a slightly deeper colour than the other 2 wines. It's more going towards golden, it's clear and bright, and you have got that gorgeous gradation of colour with a slightly watery rim in the glass. Nose-wise, loads and loads of brioche, warm bread, toasty, rich, full. That's a combination of the grape varieties. It's a combination of how long the wine has spent on its yeast lees in the second fermentation and bottle. And it's also reserve wines in the blend, because the winery will add some older wines at the final bottling stage to give a bit of extra richness and concentration. In terms of fruit, for me, this is definitely more in the exotic fruit profile. It's much more into ripe apricots, ripe peaches, much more concentrated. Full, concentrated, bready, creamy, a lovely citrus note, dry, very crisp, and again a good food matching style. So, in summary, these wines are all dry, they're all crisp, they're all refreshing, they're all elegant. The Bourgogne and the Cava are fantastic value. The Champagne, if you're pushing the boat out, but they're all made in the same way. They're fermented first in the cellar, in tanks, and then fermented a second time in the bottle. And that's called the traditional method. And that is the key component of the wine style here.